Yes, the most famous of them all. Any others?
Long John Silver.
Long John Silver, yes. Maybe Captain Hook or Pegleg or Captain Henry Morgan. He was an actual pirate. He's just not the guy on the rum bottle. So these, of course, are all pirate names. They're not the actual names of the pirates. And there were two reasons why a pirate had a pirate name. The first one was to install fear and respect into his enemies' hearts. And the second one was to protect his family from being hunted down and persecuted for being related to a pirate. Now, Klaus Störtebeker is also a pirate name. Klaus is a very typical German name, but Störtebeker is a North German dialect that means down the mug, and apparently he had this name because he could drink 4 liters of beer or wine in one gulp, so that's what his name meant and where his name came from, if you believe it or not. Now, the story of Klaus starts up in Denmark with the Princess of Denmark. Her name is Princess Margaret I, and she had a vision of unifying all of Scandinavia under her control. So she went up to Sweden and she started to conquer Sweden. She was doing pretty well until she got to the city of Stockholm, and no matter how hard she tried, she couldn't conquer the city of Stockholm. So what did she do? She barricaded the city, didn't let any food or supplies into the city, and eventually the people of Stockholm began to starve. Now, at that time, Sweden had a German king. His name was King Albrecht, and he had brought all these Germans into the city of Stockholm. So it was kind of like a half German, half Swedish city. So when word got back here to Germany that Princess Margaret was barricading the city and all these Germans were starving, a lot of people were very angry and upset, and eventually a reward was sent out for anyone that would go and attack Princess Margaret's forces. So, there was a young fisherman by the name of Klaus. He wanted the reward money, so he got some ships and he got crews for the ships, and he went up to Stockholm and began to attack Princess Margaret's navy. He was doing pretty well until he was doing pretty well because eventually there weren't any ships left to attack. They had either been sunk or they'd sailed away in fear of Klaus and his men. And Klaus was just sitting around. He had nothing to do. He was getting really bored until eventually one day he thought to himself, well, heck with it. I'll just attack any ship I can find. So that's how Klaus became a pirate. Now, Klaus was quite an exceptional pirate. He and his men were called the Lyckodeelers, which is a North German dialect that means equal sharers. And they had this name because all the treasure that they pirated, they shared equally among Klaus and his men. Usually, at that time, a pirate captain would take half the treasure and leave the other half of the treasure for his men to fight over what portion of the treasure they would get. Klaus didn't do that. He shared everything absolutely equally, which of course made him very popular in the eyes of his men. And Klaus was also known for his acts of charity. He gave a lot to the poor, so he was kind of like a Robin Hood of the seas because he stole from the rich and he gave to the poor. This made him a hero figure in the eyes of the peasants and the poor people back here in Germany. So that's basically what set Klaus apart from other pirates at that time. Now, coming back to the story of Princess Margaret and King Albrecht and Klaus up in Stockholm, basically the ships that Klaus was pirating from were the ships of the Hanseatic League, this very wealthy and powerful trading organization that I talked a little bit about at the beginning of our tour. And this was quite unacceptable to the Hanseatic League, so the Hanseatic League came up with their first plan to stop Klaus from pirating their ships. So they thought to themselves, well, Klaus is up there to attack Princess Margaret, so if we force Princess Margaret to go back to Denmark, everyone will be happy, the war will be over with, and everyone will just go back home and do whatever they were doing before the war started. So they had enough power, they forced Princess Margaret to go back to Denmark, so her plans of unifying all of Scandinavia under her control never came to be. And what do you think happened? Do you think Klaus just went back home and became a fisherman again? No, otherwise it would be a really boring story, wouldn't it? Klaus got a taste of piracy and he liked it, so the first plan of the Hanseatic League didn't work. When the Hanseatic League realized Klaus wasn't going to stop being a pirate. They were very angry and upset with him, so they sent out their navies to go hunt him down and kill him, but they could never catch him. Klaus was too good of a sailor. He always outsailed them, so they couldn't stop him that way either. So they came up with the third plan. They sent out a spy in a small fishing boat, and this fisherman went and sailed right next to Klaus's ship. And when he was right next to Klaus's ship, he started to pretend that his boat was sinking and that he was drowning. He was calling out for help, and Klaus heard this fisherman calling for help, and being the good pirate that he was, he rescued him, he brought him on board, gave him dry clothes, a warm meal, and even a bed to sleep in. But of course it was a spy for the Hanseatic League. So that night when Klaus and his men were sleeping, the spy went and poured molten lead into the rudder of the ship. Klaus wakes up the next morning, sees the Hanseatic League on the horizon, but he's basically a sitting duck. He can't steer his ship. So the Hanseatic League catches up to Klaus. There's a huge battle. Klaus loses 40 of his men and eventually is captured with 70 other of his men, and they're all brought back to Hamburg for their execution. Now, the rest of the story, you just have to believe that it happened the way I tell it, because there's no possible way that it could happen. But this is basically the legend that made Klaus so infamous. And to help us get a feeling of what happened at Klaus's execution, I need a few volunteers to come up here and help me reenact Klaus's death. So who wants to be Klaus Störtebeker? Not all at once. Anyone? Okay, let's have a round of applause for our Klaus Störtebeker. Woo! And we need an executioner to cut off Klaus's head. So who wants to cut off Klaus's head?
I wanted to be the executioner.
Too late. So, anyone you want to be an executioner? Okay, let's have a round of applause for our executioner. And we have the easiest part. We just need 2 or 3 people to stand here and be pirates. All you have to do is make pirate noises like "arr" and "matey" and "swatch the deck" and things like that. So, who wants to be pirates?
Here.
You want to be pirates?
I am a pirate, actually.
You are a pirate.
In my heart.
Oh, in your heart. Okay,
Yes.
all right. Okay, great. Anyone else want to be a pirate? You want to be a pirate? Please? Please? All right, we have one pirate. You want to be another pirate? Yes. Arr, 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 arr. So we have some pirates. Let's have a round of applause for our pirates. Okay, so we have Klaus Störtebeker, and we have all of Klaus's men lined up over in this direction. You just have to imagine there's 70 of them over in that direction. And we have the executioner. You need to come on over here, stand right here. And the executioner who's waiting to cut off Klaus and his men's heads. So, of course, here in the city, Klaus and his men, they're all condemned to death, so they have to march through the city to the executioner. But just to make it that much more humiliating, they're all stripped down naked and have to march through the city naked. So while I'm talking, you guys can start stripping down. Oh, we'll leave that part out. So, and of course, no one in the city in those days had television because there weren't any televisions back then, of course. So basically everyone's form of entertainment was watching people get their heads cut off. So everyone was lining the streets waiting to see Klaus and his men walk past them so they could follow them to the executioner and watch them get their heads cut off. Nobody in the city liked Klaus and his men because everyone was employed by the Hanseatic League. So when Klaus and his men, they're marching through the streets, people, they're cursing them, they're throwing rotten food at them, they're spitting on them. It's absolutely a humiliating experience for Klaus and his men. In fact, a small girl took her shoe and threw it at Klaus. It hit Klaus, and when Klaus and his men had moved on, the girl went to pick up her shoe and found that Klaus had filled it with gold. That would officially be the last time that Klaus gave back to the poor. And please don't ask me where he was hiding his gold, I don't know. So Klaus and his men, they're marching through the streets. Klaus is becoming very desperate. He's thinking to himself he has to do something to save himself and his men. And about halfway through, he comes up with this great idea, so he stops and he says to the Hanseatic League Council that condemned him to death, let's say that's you guys, he says,
Wait. Let me and my men go. And I will give you a gold chain. That can wrap around the city of Pembroke.
So that's his offer to the Hanseatic League. What do you think the Hanseatic League said? Well, I would say yes, apparently, but the Hanseatic League said, sorry, Klaus, we don't believe you that you have that much gold to make a chain that can wrap around the entire city, and if you do, we'll find it after we kill you. So Klaus's first plan didn't work. So they have to keep on marching through the streets. Klaus is becoming very desperate. He's getting closer to the executioner. He's thinking to himself, what can they offer if they don't want his gold? So eventually they reach the executioner. It's now or never. He has to do something to at least try and save his men. So he stops and he says to the Hanseatic League Council, he says,
Wait. Let my men go. So that I can walk fast. After you've cut my head off.
so that's his offer to the Hanseatic League. What do you think the Hanseatic League said? Well, they said, sorry to inform you, Klaus, no one can walk after their head's been cut off, but if you could, that would be pretty cool, and we would want to see it. So they agreed to Klaus. They said, if you can walk past your men after we cut your head off, we will let those men go. So Klaus gets up to the executioner, gets down on the executioner's block, gets down on the executioner's block,
Come on my knees.
however you want. Okay, so the executioner raises his axe or sword or whatever he had at that time, and with a mighty roar, cuts Klaus's head off. With a mighty roar, cuts Klaus's head off. Ah, there we go. So Klaus's head falls to the ground, but what happens to his body? His body miraculously stands up and starts to march past his men one by one. So, no one could believe their eyes that this person was walking without a head. The people were cheering, they were ranting, they were raving, they were absolutely going ecstatic. The only person that didn't like watching this was the executioner over here because he gets paid by every head he cuts off. So he's basically losing money watching Klaus walk past his men, saving his men's lives. So eventually the executioner, he can't take it anymore, so what does he do? He picks up his executioner's block, this massive and heavy wood stump, picks it up, he throws it through the air in front of Klaus. It lands in front of Klaus. Klaus trips over the executioner's block, falls to the ground. You don't have to do that. We'll just imagine you do that. But he did manage to walk past 11 of his men, theoretically saving their lives. Now the story doesn't end there. Everyone thought this was so funny from the executioner that he would try and stop Klaus from walking past his men because he was losing money, that the Hanseatic League Council jokingly asked the executioner, well, after picking up this heavy and massive wood stump and throwing it for such a long distance, do you still have enough energy to cut off all the rest of the pirates' heads? And this is what the executioner said back.
Not only do I have enough energy to cut off all the pirates' heads, but all your heads as well.
Oh, that's what he said to the Hanseatic League, this very mighty and powerful trading organization. Of course it was a joke, but apparently they didn't think it was too funny. They thought it was very disrespectful, so sad day for the executioner for saying such a stupid and disrespectful remark. They decided to cut off the executioner's head. So the executioner gets his head cut off, and afterwards they were in such a bad mood from hearing this disrespectful remark from the executioner, they decided, what? They decided not to save any of the pirates, even the pirates that Klaus had walked past, so they didn't keep their word to Klaus that they would let his men go if he could walk past them after his head had been cut off. But that's the reason why Klaus is still so well remembered today, not only for his acts of charity, but also his last-ditch effort trying to save his men, walking past them after his head had been cut off. So that's the end of the story of Klaus Störtebeker. Let's have a round of applause for our great actors here. Thank you so much for being up here. So, that's also the end of our tour today. I want to thank you guys. You guys have been a really great group. If you guys have any questions about how to get somewhere or things to do while you're here in the city, please do ask me. I will be around for a few minutes after the tour. And I have to mention, we do have our pub crawl tonight. It starts at 9:30 at the Beatles Platz. That's at the Raper Barn. You go to 5 different bars and clubs. You get a free drink at every bar and club you go to. It's a great way to meet new people and have a great time on the Raper Barn. So if any of you are interested, it starts at 9:30 at the Beatles Platz at the Raper Barn. So, as I mentioned a little bit earlier, I will be going to this really excellent traditional Hamburg restaurant. So if any of you want to try some really excellent food, then you're more than welcome to come along. Just wait a few minutes after the tour, and I will shortly be going to this restaurant. So, as I mentioned at the beginning of the tour, I do work on a tip-only basis, so I will be accepting whatever amount you feel is a fair amount for my service to you today. And I just have to say, you guys have really been the best group that I've ever had today. No, but seriously, you guys have been a really fun group. I really enjoyed having you on my tour today. I hope you enjoyed my tour, and I wish you all a great time while you're here in the city of Hamburg. And I wish you all a safe and pleasant travel back home whenever and wherever that may be. So thank you all very much.